welcome to the Wildline Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today is going to be the weekend review show for May 10th through the 12th, 2019. I will walk through the top 10. We have a few new wide releases we can do deeper dives on. We'll talk about Avengers Endgame Weekend 3, some limited stuff we might touch upon, and then we'll walk through the rest of May in terms of what's coming out. Let's dive right into the top 10. Number 1 this weekend, I was a little bit surprised. I thought Pokemon Detective Pikachu might beat Avengers Endgame in its third weekend, but that did not happen. Avengers Endgame came in at $63 million with a 57% drop. So here's the deal on that. That's a great third weekend performance, obviously. The problem here is that the drop's pretty high. 57% kind of too high if you want to have legs that are like 2.5x or higher. So it looks like Endgame is not going to have the domestic legs that I thought it was going to have. And what that means from a bigger sort of context is it doesn't look like it's going to beat Force Awakens for the domestic record. Last weekend, I was pretty confident that it would, but after this weekend's performance, now in the grand scheme of things, everything's fantastic about Endgame. It's going to make Disney and Marvel, $500 million in profit. It's going to be one of the most successful movies of all time. It still might beat the worldwide Avatar record. But I think as of this weekend, it has lost too much ground versus Force Awakens to beat it. Now, maybe it comes back this week. Maybe it comes back next weekend. I just don't see that happening. And sort of the turning point here was, when these movies got released, obviously opening weekend, Endgame, beat Force Awakens by about $110 million. And so that was the sort of head start that it had on Force Awakens for the domestic record. Remember, the domestic record is 936 for Force Awakens. Force Awakens also had the holiday season, so its drops were super low weekend to weekend. Had amazing daily business or during the week business, weekday business, because everybody was off of school and college and stuff like that, and people were off of work. So it had that going for it. Avengers Endgame does not have that going for it. And so from opening weekend, that $110 million gap has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller until Friday, when Force Awakens was then in the 15th day of release, up $10 million on Endgame. And that was kind of the end of it. On Saturday, Force Awakens was now up $17 million. And then today, it looks like Force Awakens will go up about $20 million. So it doesn't look like Avengers Endgame is going to hit that 936 domestic all-time record, which I think is pretty surprising because, it was out in front so much. I mean, $110 million more opening weekend than Force Awakens. You would think that it would be able to sort of, just jog across the finish line and win. But that's not going to happen. And here's probably why it's not going to happen. And this is something that I brought up with MCU a few times over the last couple of years. There is, for all the amazing things we say about MCU, there is a small weakness in the ensemble films. Specifically, like I'm thinking about Ultron and Captain America Civil War. What happens there is they pop off opening weekend, but they tend to be very front-loaded. And Endgame's going to end up being super front-loaded. I don't think it's going to even make a 2.5x multiplier. Average movie that's doing very well, 2.8 to 3x multiplier. That's just the average, of a successful film. It's not going to come anywhere near that. And then, you think about Ultron, you think about Civil War. What's happening there is, and the weird thing is this doesn't happen with Black Panther or Captain Marvel, because those are one-off films that you don't need to know the 20 other MCU movies to enjoy. You can go to see Black Panther totally cold. Like, same thing with Captain Marvel. You don't have to have the canon memorized in your head of MCU. That's not the case with Endgame. It wasn't the case with Ultron, and it wasn't the case with Infinity War. You kind of have to be bought into the canon and know all of these other films to get the full experience. And so what is happening here is that group of people, I'll call it the mainline MCU audience, has already seen the movie. They've probably seen it twice or three times. Once you get outside that group of people, the audience all of a sudden disappears and dwindles pretty dramatically. So that's what's happening with Endgame. In contrast to Force Awakens, which I think has maybe I want to say a broader appeal. Not that it's that much bigger, But I think with Force Awakens, you can get anybody to go to see that. Like, my parents aren't going to go see Endgame. My parents went to go see, when they're like late 60s, early 70s. They would go see Force Awakens. They went to go see all the Star Wars movies, but they're not going to see any of the Avengers films. So I think Star Wars Force Awakens is a little more of a 4-quad situation, whereas Endgame is 4-quad within the MCU mainline audience, but once you get outside that audience, it disappears. The ticket sales disappear. So that's why I think Endgame's definitely... There's no way now it's going to hit the domestic record. It's not even going to happen. I think it's mostly because of that sort of like that tight-knit group of fans who see it, and then there's no one else who wants to go. But that's like sort of like neither here nor there. It's already at $723 million. It's going to end up, who knows where it ends up. You know, the multiplier is going to be what, 2.4, 2.3 ish, somewhere in that range. I wonder what a 2.4 would be on 357. Let's pull up the trusty calculator. It's 850. So I think that's probably about right. It probably ends up about $850 million. So, you know, about $80 to $100 million off of the record. Again, not really expected. I had thought that this one was going to be different because it was the send-off for MCU, or at least this part of MCU. So I am a little bit surprised its legs are sort of given out underneath it here in its third weekend. But there is the possibility that it does come back, but I don't see how at this point. Force Awakens just had such an abnormal sort of like Titanic level, like, you know, second, third month that was super strong. I don't think that's going to happen with Endgame. And plus, there's so much stuff coming out for the summer that, I don't think it's going to be able to recover that. But again, it's all within the context of just the domestic record. Everything else for Endgame is like a grand slam. One of the best performing movies of all time. A massive, massive, huge win for Disney. I think it's went way beyond its expectations. I don't think the domestic record was ever in their heads that they could beat that for Force Awakens, but I think they're going to be very happy with this performance for Endgame. And then we'll see what happens with MCU. I have no idea which direction it's going to go. You have Captain Marvel now as a foundational character. You have Black Panther as a foundational character. And so you're going to add some more, and then probably have another Avengers movie in like 5 years or something like that. So great performance, but just not super strong in its third weekend. Let's talk about Pokemon Detective Pikachu. So this one did pretty well. I thought, based on the memes and the hypeage online, that we're thinking about 70 to 80, but I was wrong. Tracking was like 50 to 55. This came in at $58 million for the weekend. Super saturated wide release, 4,200 theaters. Per theater average was actually higher than Avengers. It was $13,800 versus Endgame's third weekend per theater average of $13,500. Budget in this one was $150 million, but also a massive marketing budget. Let's talk a little bit about the quality here on Pokemon Detective Pikachu. Rotten Tomatoes score of 63% from critics, which is okay. 5.9 out of 10 for actual score from critics. That's not very good. Audience score was 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, grain of salt as always. Cinema score of an A-, that was good. It's already a pretty big discrepancy here between critics and fans. It's also one of those movies that, like, you know, the Pokemon phenomenon's been around forever. You had the Pokemon Go game, which was like a worldwide phenomenon. What was it, like 2 years ago-ish? So there's just like a built-in fan base worldwide for this. In terms of Letterboxd score from the film nerds, 3.3 out of 5. Similar to Ralph Breaks the Internet at 3.4, similar to Lego 2 at 3.4. And I just threw Spirited Away in there just to give us like a barometer, which had a 4.4. So like, it's not amazing, but it's good enough for people to really enjoy it. That's the sort of message that I'm getting from this data. 4 stars from general audiences on Post Track, which is great. 4.5 from kids under 12. The audience was 56% male, so a little bit over indexed on the male. Usually an audience is about 50 to 53% male. 61% under 25, which is massively skewed towards a younger audience. Just in general, in terms of ticket buyers overall, only 33% are under 25 normally. So this way over indexed with that group of people. 32% were under the age of 17, which is just massive, which makes sense. In terms of demographics here, 48% Caucasian, that's a little bit under normal. 24% Hispanic, that's right in line with normal audience. 18% Asians, way over normal. Usually that audience is about 7%. African American was a little bit down at 10%. The movie played well in the West and Midwest, but pretty much strong everywhere, is what Deadline is saying. Okay, so that's a good performance overall. Like legs wise, how's this thing gonna do? It's after I feel like because it's geared towards children. It's kind of a family film. I don't know. I guess it's a family film. It seems kind of like almost a little noirish and dark for that. But at 58, you're probably looking at a baseline domestic of 174. Let's take a look at international, how it's doing. Really good international so far. 112 internationally, so 170 worldwide. I think this is going to be a pretty strong performance. It's hard to tell, though, because the production budget was so high at 150. Deadline was kind of talking about it like, oh, this is successful. And I think it's pretty successful. But, like, if we just throw the numbers out there, 150 in terms of production budget, that's probably a total releasing cost of like $400 to $500 million. That's every platform, every region, all the way through basic cable. So it's going to need to make about, let's say, usually needs to make about 85%. So it needs to make about, I think, like 382-ish. Somewhere around that. So I think I can't tell yet. I guess is the what I'm getting at. I just don't know. I need to see what it does worldwide a lot more. I think domestically it's going to do okay. If it does do 150 domestically, it's probably going to be a small portion of its overall take. You're looking at, I think right now it's looking like a break-even profitable territory. So it's looking pretty good. It's really going to depend on the legs. Based on the quality of the movie, critics didn't love it. Audiences seem to like it a lot more than critics. That's a good sign for legs. So I think it's in a good spot. I think it's in a good spot to make some money for Warner Brothers on this one. And so I thought it was going to pop off a lot more, though. I thought this was really going to break out based on like what people were saying online. I thought even like 80, 90 was a possibility, but it just didn't really materialize. And the risk here too, kind of like the MCU Endgame situation, if there's just like a set mainline audience for this and then there's nothing else in the general audience, that could be problematic for its legs. But we'll see how that plays out in the second weekend. Why is this doing so well? You have a built-in IP. You had the Pokemon Go game. You have Ryan Reynolds doing a lot of like what he did for Deadpool, which is just using his own social media, getting out there and talking about the film constantly. I think that's one of the major reasons why this has done pretty well here. But we'll see how it does in the second weekend if its legs can hold. So another wide release here was The Hustle from United Artists Releasing, $13.5 million in 3,000 theaters. Per theater average was $4,500. The Hustle is a weird one. So it's kind of like, it's not really a spy movie. It's a comedy. Anne Hathaway, Rebel Wilson are the leads. It was supposed to come out last summer, but I think there was scheduling difficulty with Ocean's 8 or whatever that movie was, the Ocean's 8 with the whole female cast last summer. So it kept on getting moved. MGM pushed it to this year. It's kind of a weird spot, I guess. Mother's Day would be the whole point of opening it this weekend. The movie is completely trash. I mean, you look at these scores. Rotten Tomatoes score 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, that's like one of the worst scores I've ever seen for a wide release. Even worse than that is the 3.9 out of 10 actual score. I mean, critics hated this movie. Audience score from Rotten Tomatoes 43%. Cinema score B-, which kind of is not nearly as bad as that critic score, but not good. Letterboxd was 2.4, which is really bad. Compared to some other movies that I think are related, The Spy Who Dumped Me, I think is a really good comp. 2.9 that had, so it's even lower than that, and that was not well received at all. Isn't It Romantic, the recent Rebel Wilson movie that came out earlier this year for Valentine's Day holiday, that did 2.7 on Letterboxd. So it's this is not a good movie, and its legs. Deadline, I think, is saying that like their legs might kick in on this. I don't think that's going to happen because the movie's not really good at all. There's too much competition. There's all these Netflix movies that are coming out like Wine Country and stuff like that. So I don't think this thing's going to go anywhere. Now, $13 million for this weekend is not terrible, but you got to kind of wonder, okay, where is it going to go from here? 13.5, maybe a 2.4 multiplier, maybe a little bit higher. I would say like probably $35 million on that one. That's not the end of the world for this. I don't know what the production budget was. It probably was a little bit higher than you think, just because of Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson. I think especially Anne Hathaway, I think she has a pretty big paycheck these days. So I think it's an okay performance. It's not great. I think at best it's a break even. It's the question between break even and a loss, and how much of a loss. I don't think it's going to be profitable. And this thing was kind of dumped. It was dumped on this weekend. A breakout for this would have been like 23, closes out at like 60, 70. That would have been a breakout. It's not going to happen at all. You'd be lucky to make half of that breakout amount. So I don't think MGM or United Artists are going to be happy with this at all. I don't think Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson should be happy about this. I mean, what happened with this movie? Why is it so bad? Is the big question that I have. Like, those two, Rebel Wilson's not in like the greatest movies ever, but like, there's something about this one it's felt like really off. And I'm not sure why. Who's the director? Chris Addison directed this. What else did he do? He's 47 from the UK. Let's see. Has he directed anything else? Oh, he did a lot of Veep. So he's a good comedic director. He did The Thick of It. So mostly TV he's directed. He did Fresh Off the Boat, one episode. But the 13 episodes of Veep, that's a really good sign. He's also doing a new movie called Hallelujah. So kind of a new film director. It just didn't go well for whatever reason. Probably a really poor script is what I would suspect. I mean, I watched the trailer. It just looks so stupid. But I will say this, though. The one thing when I noticed the trailer, I was like, this would have played well like 15, 20 years ago. Like 1999 to like 2005. Like this might have done okay. I think audiences are just so different now. And they want something different, and The Hustle is just not what they want. It's just like too on the nose with the concept, and I think people want something just different. And obviously, they didn't show up that much for this movie. But it's like I said, 13.5 is not that bad. It's kind of in like the break-even loss territory, but not a huge loss. It's not like a massive flop. So we'll keep an eye on that one and see how the legs do in its second weekend. Number 4 is The Intruder. From Sony Gems. We talked about this one last week. A really good hold on that one. 39% hold, $6.6 million, $21 million on an $8 million production budget is not bad for domestic. It's not going to have international sort of play on this. So I think Sony Gems is going to be like, oh yeah, this is okay. We're not going to lose any money off of this. So I think that's good performance. That's a great hold. And you can just compare that hold to something like Endgame, where it's like, that's such a massive movie. 57% drop. Can you imagine if Endgame had a 39% drop this weekend? It'd be insane. But this is the different types of films playing, right? So Long Shot, so that was number 4. Number 5 was Long Shot with 6.1 million. Also a great hold, 37% hold here, or drop, I should say. Per theater average is not great, $1,900 per theater. Total take so far, 19.7 million. This thing just didn't start out high enough so that these low drops are really going to matter all that much. It's going to help it get to a 3x multiplier. We talked about that last week. Their Seth Rogen movies have like an average like a 3.5x multiplier, which is insane. But that's just, you're too low. You started out too low. They're just not going to make it to a really profitable area for this movie, which is too bad because it sounds like it's really good. And people seem to really enjoy it. It runs really long. I think it's 2 hours long. I mean, come on. Isn't there like a romantic comedy dramedy thing where it's like 90 minutes is like the max? I think that should be the golden rule. This one is not, but you can't argue with that drop. That's a great drop. The best you could ask for in a second weekend for this movie is essentially the byline here. Is it going to continue to have those drops? I don't think so. I think it's a Mother's Day thing. I think people want to go to see a movie with their mom. This is the movie they can go see. But a great second weekend. But I just don't think it's going to be enough to put it in the profitable and win territory. So that was number 5. Number 6 was a new ride release, Poms from SDX. This one I didn't know anything about. I had to watch the trailer this week. I was like, oh, like this, why, I'm looking at the numbers today. I'm like, why did this do so terrible? Only did 5.1 million. That's awful. 2,700 theaters. Per theater average was like 1850, 1860. This one's a little bit weird. You would think that with this film, it's kind of like a book club play. It's like over 55 crowd. Women over 25 are 63% of the audience giving it 81% positive. Critics gave it a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. So terrible. 4.6 out of 10. Also terrible. Which did not, with the cast that they have in this and the trailer that I saw, it didn't seem like a 29% was even possible here. It didn't look that bad at all. It looked kind of entertaining and fun for what it was. Cinema score is B+. So the audience they kind of like this movie. Letterboxd, which is kind of weird for this movie because that's all film nerds and this is like an over 55 movie, but 3.0. Book Club got a 2.8, so higher than that. Going in Style, which I thought was similar, 3.0. The Intern, which I thought was kind of related, 3.2. So it's kind of in that range. Tracking on this was 7 to 10 million, according to Deadline and sort of industry whatever sources. So it came in below that. Obviously played well with Deadline calls it the Southeast Retirement Belt. What the hell does that mean? So basically Florida, right? What does that mean? So it played well down there, obviously. 29% were over 55 years of age compared to Hustle, which was only 5% over 55. So the old people went to this movie versus Hustle. Seniors loved Poms at 93%. I guess that's like positive score. I don't even know what they mean by that. Okay, so here's the bottom line. It played well with older audiences. They hit the demo right, but Deadline gets a bullseye on this for their analysis. They just didn't spend enough on marketing up front. They have sources telling them that it was half of a normal sort of domestic comedy marketing budget, which they put at like $30 to $35 million. So they spent like 15, 16, 17 million dollars to market this. I had never heard of it before. And so Deadline brings up a really good point that like for these micro targeting campaigns where they try to release a movie, and STX is super guilty of this all the time. You know, for $15 million, what can you get for that versus like a normal $30 to $40 million marketing campaign for the US and Canada? Well, for the $30-40 million, you're going to get TV, you're going to get print, you're going to get more traditional radio, you're going to get more traditional means of advertising, which is going to hit the older demographics. When you try to do the micro budget stuff, Blumhouse does this all the time, you do social media. Right? And it's not like old people aren't on social media. They're just not on social media as much as younger people. So when you do a lot of YouTube ads, Facebook ads, Instagram, Snapchat stuff, that's going to hit the younger folks, but it's not going to hit the older folks. And I think that's probably what happened here is they tried to do kind of a new age or kind of millennial marketing campaign for this movie to keep those costs super low in the $15 million range. And it just didn't hit the right audience. You know, like I said, like I always say every week, like if you want to get people out to the movie theater, it is like driving them to vote or getting them to vote. It's a campaign. And think of how many times you have to hit somebody with a message in order to get them to, you know, spend $15, get in their car, spend the gas, spend the time to go see a movie in the theater, deal with the public. Those are high barriers. And for something like a movie like this, you know, I think it's going to play well during the week. I think older people are going to see it who are retired. I'm sure my mom will see it. It'll play well during the week. It'll play well next weekend. It could have a nice slow burn, but just like Long Shot, it's taken off too low. So it's not going to get to that, you know, super profitable area, even if it has amazing legs. And that's too bad because it's like, it seems like audiences are responding well. Seniors obviously loved it and they're the target demographic. So that's what you want. The problem is that the marketing didn't have the width that it needed. And they probably needed to spend like $10 million, $20 million more to really get it where it needed to go and, you know, open at 15 and close out at 45. I think probably was their goal here for something like this. You know, it wasn't going to be a $100 million movie, but then, you know, Book Club did what, like $68 million domestically? I think that's probably what they were hoping for, maybe a little lower than that, but like that's not going to happen now. It's just going to sort of completely dissipate at the movie theater, and you know they got to quickly shovel this off to VOD and get it on streaming as soon as possible. So that's the story on Poms. So I think, you know, I'm looking at these new ride releases. We also have another new ride release. I didn't really touch upon that much. We'll get to that in a second. So that was number 6, Poms, 5.1 million. Ugly Dolls was 3.9 million, 54% drop. Way too high for a children's film. A drop there. You want like a 45 at the highest level for a drop in the second weekend for a children's film. $1,000 per theater average. That sits at 14.2 million. That's a bomb. STX is just like, they get like one win for every 10 bombs now. It's pathetic. Or it's sad more than pathetic, I should say. Breakthrough, 2.4 million. Great drop, 37% drop. Starting to lose theaters, though, so this one's going to lose steam real fast. Lost 900 theaters this weekend. Which is strange because you think that you would want to keep it strong through Mother's Day, because it does really seem like a Mother's Day type movie. But $37 million total take so far for Breakthrough from Fox on a $14 million production budget. I think that's okay. I don't think, it's not breaking out. There's not a huge foreign market. It's at $45 million total worldwide. Yeah, maybe they'll like make it up on like VOD. Maybe they'll put like the Hallmark Channel or something. I don't know. But it's not a great performance. There was a new ride release at number 9 here, Tolkien. 2.1 million, opened up in 1,500 theaters. Per theater average was anemic at 1440 per theater. This one's going nowhere, like I said. I just don't get the releasing strategy here. This is a fall movie. This is an arty movie. This is not a 1,500 theater opening. This is a platform release at best. And it's in that weird middle ground where it's like, it's kind of not super arty, but it's also not super wide releasey, right? So it's like, do you go for like, you can't hit the art house audience, you can't hit mass wide release. And it's in the middle. It's like no man's land. And that's why you have a per theater average that is just atrocious for opening weekend. You want to be well over $3,000-$4,000 for opening weekend, and they're sitting at $1,440. So Tolkien's going nowhere. And so number 10 was Captain Marvel. That one has a huge drop to almost identical drop to Endgame. 57% drop, starting to lose a lot of theaters. That one's going to start running out of steam here. But at $423 million domestically, so amazing performance for Captain Marvel, along with Endgame. Outside the top 10, Curse of La Llorona, that's dropping off a lot. It's $51 million so far for that movie, which is not bad. Shazam at 12, sitting at 137 right now. That's a good performance for that as well. Some random movies that I've never heard of. Student of the Year 2, no idea what that is. Opened in 190 theaters, 2,300 per theater average. Biggest Little Farm from Neon, I don't know this one either. It's a documentary, 20K per theater on 5 theaters, which okay. All Is True, another limited platform release. That did 4 theaters, typical New York, Los Angeles looks like release. For 11K per theater, so that's really going nowhere. Charlie Says, another one I have no idea what this is. $1,000 per theater, crime drama. There's just a lot of limited stuff, and none of it's doing well. My Son from Cohen, I don't even know what this is. $1,500 per theater on 3 theaters. Why would you even release that? It's not even rated. Some weird stuff coming out this weekend. I don't know. Maybe it's the Mother's Day holiday. Just bizarre. But the sort of headlines here that I'm seeing just from the top 10, Pokemon does well. It's definitely in the break even profitable territory as of now. Endgame, despite its amazing performance, it's going to come up short in domestic record. Worldwide record's still in play, without a doubt. Like, I think it has a good chance of beating Avatar, but the domestic is not going to help there. Hustle did okay, but like it's not going to break out at all. Poms is a little bit of a flop at this point. Tolkien is definitely a flop. So that's sort of the quick rundown of the top 10. Some other movies. Let's talk about what's going to happen here over the next few weeks at the box office. A Dog's Journey coming out next weekend from Universal, 3,200 theaters. That should do okay. I'm not sure. I'm not even really sure where I would place that one. Maybe like a $15 to $20 million opening, I think. John Wick Chapter 3. I've heard Parabellum. I've heard really good things about this. The early reaction is fantastic from critics. I just think it's going to break out. I mean, is it really breaking out? It's John Wick 3. I think it's going to do quite well. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like, that's a 50-ish opening. Maybe even higher. There's something about that movie and Keanu Reeves that like, it just like everybody loves him. It's like a 4-quad action movie. Everybody loves it. And so I think it's going to do quite well. The Son is also a star from Warner Brothers. I don't know much about that one, but that's coming out next week in about 2,100 theaters. Don't really have a status on that one or what I think I'm going to do. A24 has The Souvenir coming out. That should be interesting. Then May 24th, Booksmart, another United Arts releasing. I don't think it's going to do very well, but I hear it's very good. Olivia Wilde's directorial debut. A lot of buzz from the festival circuit. I think Sundance especially. Brightburn is a Sony Gems horror movie. Sony Gems is really Elizabeth Banks is in this? What? Wait, Interesting. I need to know more. Oh, producer James Gunn. Oh, now I remember what this movie is. So that has a chance of breaking out just because the people are involved. I forgot that was coming out next in 2 weeks. And then Aladdin, of course, is coming out on the 24th, which I couldn't tell you which way that one's going to go because it's like, it's Disney live action. Is this $180 million like Beauty and the Beast? Is this like $80 million? Is this like $50 million? I have no clue. I mean, Aladdin's beloved, but like Guy Ritchie, it just looks kind of all over the place. My guess on that one, it's gonna pop off opening weekend, and I don't think the quality's probably there, so it's just gonna kind of tailspin. And Disney's not had a good run. I mean, okay, outside of the Marvel stuff, I should say, the Marvel stuff is just like running that company. Like they could start, $500 million in profit from Endgame alone. But the other stuff, like Dumbo and the stuff from last year, did not do well. The Nutcracker one was awful. In this one, I don't know. I mean, I think they really bet a lot of money on these live action remakes, and I don't think Aladdin's going to do all that well, but we will see. I've been wrong before about those. Then to close out May, you're looking at Godzilla, King of Monsters. That looks great. I think it's going to do quite well. Ma, a thriller from Universal, and Rocketman, a musical from Paramount. I think Godzilla is going to be a really strong closer for May, and then we're into let's dive into June really quickly here, because I have not looked at the summer movie release schedule all that much. So Dark Phoenix, the X-Men movie, that's coming out on June 7th. That should do okay, but like the X-Men movies are kind of a tough sell. Late Night, Amazon Studios. That is interesting because that kind of Amazon Studios summer release, kind of a comedy, coming of age film for like 30-somethings. I guess, is that Midlife Crisis? Not really. I guess the Emma Thompson's the older character, so whatever. We'll call it a coming of age for older adults. That I have my eye on that one because there's a potential for breakout. Do I think it's going to break out? Would I bet money on it? No, but the quality is certainly there. The buzz in that movie was off the charts with the festival circuit, so it could break out. But it's June 7th is tough for that sort of stuff. I like the fact that Amazon's pushing it out in June. I think it's kind of a bold move. I don't know if it's going to play out or not. Secret Life of Pets 2 coming out on June 7th. That's a busy weekend between X-Men and that movie. I mean, Secret Life of Pets is just going to print money. The first one did. It doesn't matter how good or bad it is. It's just like people love those movies. They go out to see them with their kids. They're going to make a huge profit. And then June 14th, Men in Black International and Shaft come out. And that the June 14th weekend really reminds me of like the 90s. You got Samuel L. Jackson and Shaft. You got Men in Black. What is this, like 1998? It feels that way to me. You have X-Men before that too. So I have no idea how any of this movie is going to do. I couldn't even tell you. Men in Black International feels like it could do okay. Is the Men in Black series really still popular with people? Especially under 25 people? I have no clue. I think Shaft's going to do well because it's like, multiple generations involved. It looks kind of fun. It's kind of like your typical summer fun movie, action movie. And then to sort of close out June, you have, well, it's actually not closing out June. It's the second to last weekend. You have Anna, Child's Play, Toy Story 4. I forgot that was coming out. And Wild Rose from Neon. Wow, this is a really stacked summer now that I'm looking at. We got off to a really strong start with Endgame. It's kind of a little bit chiller here in these next week or so. But then we know once Godzilla hits, it's full on. And then take a look at the final weekend here in June. Yesterday comes out, a comedy from Universal. I don't know that one either. I got to do more research, folks. That's the sound. Annabelle Comes Home comes out on June 26th. And let's just keep going. I just want to see what else is anything. Midsummer comes out July 4th. That's the follow up to Hereditary. Not like a sequel, but it's Ari Aster, his second sort of horror movie for A24. Spider-Man Far From Home comes out in the 3rd as well. 21 Bridges. Wow, Lion King comes out this summer too. Man, Disney's really stacking those up. Once Upon a Time at Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino comes out on the 26th. The Boy 2 comes out on the 26th. A lot of horror films, too. Like Crawl's coming out on the 12th. 21 Bridges, a crime thriller, comes out on the 12th, too. Interesting summer. I think it's a little bit, it seems kind of front heavy here in May and June. June is just so stacked. But then I'm looking at like August, you got Fast and the Furious, Hobbs and Shaw. That's going to be massive. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark on August 9th. It's a little bit of a stronger August than normal too. So there's a little bit of lull in July, it seems. And then obviously the end of August, everything sort of drops off because everybody's going back to school. But it should be interesting in a few weeks here. Thanks for listening, folks. I will be back next weekend. This has been the Wildline Podcast.